Hey, what's up, everyone? Last week I filmed a video fishing some rock wall for winter bass, and I didn't have a mic, and the audio really sucked. So this week I wanted to kind of sit down and explain the baits that I used, how I fished them, and what the conditions were that I fished them in. Um, right now we're in the winter time. It's mid-January. We're in California, and the water temperatures have dropped anywhere from 30 to about 45 degrees, maybe less than that. In the wintertime, bass are going to become really lethargic. They're not going to want to move to get baits. They're not going to want to chase. You really got to get that bait in front of them, and you're going to have to let it sit there for a long time. So typically there's three baits that I fish in the wintertime, and that's a jerk bait, a jig, and some kind of drop shot bait. And the reason I fish those is because you need to slow way down. You're going to have to put that bait in front of them for 30 seconds to maybe a minute. And for me, that's really hard to do. I'm a fast fishing kind of guy. I like to throw my bait out there, flip it a couple times, bounce it a couple times, and pull it back in. So wintertime for me is really tough. So the day before I shot the video, I was out with my son, and we went out and we caught a couple fish. So we knew that the fishing was going to be good. So I wanted to get out and film the next day. So the next day I woke up about 7 o'clock. I went out. It was brutal cold. I got in the water, and it was probably about 35 degrees was the water temperature. So I started off with a drop shot bait. And the bait I was using, I had rigged up prior for the Delta. And I had it hooked up with a, this is called a rebar, ultralight finesse hook. And it's got a bait keeper, and I had my, my worm hooked up with that. And the reason I was fishing this is because in the California Delta, we're fishing a lot of grass lines, laydowns, a lot of stuff that can hang up your bait. So this is a Texposed kind of hook where the bait can lay on here and it won't get caught. So that was the hook I was using. So for the first hour, I didn't really get any bites, and then I got my first bite, and I set the hook, and it was probably a good 4-pound fish, and I had him all the way to the boat, and he jumped off. And so then I continued to fish, and I got a couple more bites, and every time I'd set the hook, I would either hook the fish and get him close to the boat, and he would spit the bait, or I just wouldn't get a good hook set. So I decided to go away from the this hook and went to a 2-aught little ultralight Mustang drop shot hook. And this hook, you nose hook the bait, and it is open. It's an exposed hook, and you can get a lot more hookup with this. And the reason I started fishing this is because I was fishing rock wall, and there was no snags. So the bait I was using is called a 5-inch finicky tickler, and it's by Power Team Lures. And I was using Scooper Noggin Blue Flake, and this bait is just a phenomenal bait. It's become a really confident bait for me. The tail has gotten stream action. You can just let it sit there and it just quivers. And I got probably about 4 or 5 fish on this bait, anywhere between the 2 and 3 pound range. And the bites weren't really hard bites. I was bringing that bait probably about 9 feet down, about 5 feet off the bank, and it seemed like the fish were biting right after I got off the drop wall, or off the rock wall, probably in about 9 feet. And I was letting that bait sit there for about 30 seconds, 45 seconds, and when I would pull up on the rod, I would just feel pressure, and I knew I had a fish, so I'd set the hook. And the bites weren't really hitting the bait, the bass. They were just picking it up. So about midday, I decided to switch over and try some flipping. I noticed that with the drop shot, when I would catch a fish, I would throw in that same area and I'd get 3 or 4. So they were probably schooled up due to the winter and being cold. So the next thing I set up was a flipping jig, and I went with a Elk Rivers jig. It's a 3/0 finesse jig, um, and I paired that with a Power Team Lures Craw d'Oeuvre, and this one is called Green Pumpkin Copper Flake is the one I used. That's the bait right there. Um, and what I was doing with that is I was flipping up onto the top of the rocks, and I was bouncing it down the rocks, and the bites for that were more aggressive. The bites came usually when I popped the bait, and then they would hit it. I got a few when the bait was just sitting there and I'd pick up and feel pressure, but most of the time the bass were hitting it hard. So I caught about 5 or 6 on that bait. All the fish came in about 9 feet of water, a little bit off the bank. And it was just a good day. We caught a lot of fish, caught probably about 20-25 fish. I was only out there for about 2 hours, and that's great for a wintertime pattern. So hopefully this video helps a little bit. It helped explain kind of what I was doing in that video. Kind of explain some of the baits I was using, how I was using them, and look forward to making a couple more videos and having you guys watch them.